was started about February 2 years ago when Percy stood here and did a little talk about regenerative agriculture, and then we started this group, and we were all very interested in this to try and improve our soils and our grazing. With the changes in the country and the lack of getting relatively cost-effective maintenance for our cattle, we've had to change the way we do cattle in this country to a large degree, and we have to rely more and more on our veld and see how we can change our farming methods and to improve our soils. So what we thought we'd do today is we'd ask Mark possibly to start, and then we talked about this.
No, you didn't, but anyway.
Mark was very nearly late, so we're starting with Mark. As you've all watched on our little group, Mark has gone and invested actually a lot of money into his little regenerative patch and on his farm there. So he's a slightly different situation in that he's ploughed and he's got irrigation, and so that's one aspect. And then John and Marie down in Macheki have been doing the electric fencing, and then Jaap is going to focus more on the veld per se and what happens in the veld. There are 18 copies of his talk. Jaapie, as usual, always does his homework. He's the teacher's pet. Thank goodness if he did it all, because otherwise there'd be nothing to take home. So there are some copies there. I'd also like to thank Uchi from Nurture and Elliot from Nurture and Mark for being able to film this today, so maybe more people can hear what we chat about than just us here. Without any further ado, Mark, maybe you can just tell us why you started, what you've done. We've recently seen that lovely video with how rich your veld looks there. It hasn't been fertilized for 2 years. How you've got free-range laying hens. You've got your little dairy, and maybe you can mention what Percy's done there, trying to get adapted cows. And then you've also got your Boran cross heifers there and your Boran pairbred heifers there. So maybe you can just start off.
First of all, thanks to Helen and Maria and the Mashona Society. As you see, I've come very well prepared. I'm going to steal your paper. I'm terrible at paperwork, everyone knows that. So what happened was Percy came and did some embryos and took some embryos out of Mashona, both at ourselves and Marie. And with having Percy there and having time, we got into the regenerative farming. But Percy sent me a couple of YouTube articles, and the one by that lady who sort of tests all the soils and everything in New Zealand. And I was watching this in the bath and I actually had tears in my eyes, and I said, I now have a future in farming, because we got no land left. We got 20 hectares of flay. What are we going to do with this flay? And the regen gave me some hope that you don't need hectares and hectares and hectares of land to actually farm. So when Percy was there, we got into the dairy and embryos and everything, and we walked down to this 20 hectares of flay, and we've only sort of regenerated so far the one half of it, and basically what we've done is all with the livestock and followed basically Percy. So we have tried, but it hasn't worked, but we've tried to seed our pasture with a Rome harrow. That really didn't work. We were very kindly lent a very fancy drill planter by Niels van Heerden. That really didn't work. So we've gone back to spending no money, which is actually quite nice. So we're just spending no money. We're just buying seed, collecting seed. I've got a couple of sacks what we're doing at the back there that everyone can look at. So we just collect seed. We bought winter seeds. We have done that. So we put some ryegrass in and a lot of clover. The ryegrass really can't get through the kikuyu. The kikuyu is about that thick of mulch now, so nothing really gets through except for the clover. And I really think if anyone's going to do it in Zim, any of the legumes will really sort out your veld. And there are legumes for dry land, there are legumes for wet land, there's legumes for winter, legumes for summer. You just got to try it. Just got to get on and do it. So we have done nothing to this pasture except we've tried to seed it in summer and try to seed it in winter. As you've heard, not very successfully. And we've just irrigated it. So it's had no fertilizer, no land prep, no ploughing, no nothing. So traditionally we used to put 800 kgs of fertilizer on every year. For the last 2 years we've done 0. And our pasture is looking healthier than it ever has. Things like Spirobolus and that are, and I'm going to say unfortunately now becoming less and less because they can't compete. Their seed can't germinate through all this mat of clover, stargrass, panicum. It just can't germinate through it. So unfortunately the Spirobolus is getting less and less. And why I say unfortunately is because we've got a flay area and then a horrible laterite area of about 4 hectares, and the flay's the other 7. And the cattle always seem to like to go and sleep uphill, and they all go and walk past the kikuyu and go and eat the Spirobolus first. So do I plant more Spirobolus? I don't know. But it is naturally seeding, but I just don't think it's going to get through. It's going to get through that mat of grass. At the moment, we irrigate with the old laterals, so 18-meter spacing. So at the moment, I've put rip lines down every 18 meters, and we're planting. We'll try and identify it. We're planting a type of Barna grass that I've found by Lake Chavero there. Very thick, broad leaf, gets very tall, but when I've planted it in the veggie garden, it's going to be so much bulk. It's whether the cattle are going to eat it or not. But it looks like a very, very bulky grass. And every 18 meters, so we planted that 5 meters apart. Then in those lines we're planting moringa, leucaena, mulberries, and sort of anything else, a legume and that, the bush that's going to be a bit higher than the star and the kikuyu. So that's presently what we're doing right now, is doing our irrigation lines. And like I say, I bought a whole lot of seed there and everything that everyone can look at. And I can, if we got time, I can explain how we put the seed onto this pasture just with a Vicon. We got our cattle crawl quite close, so we just go and get a whole lot of manure. I've got about a 10 mil sieve. We just sieve all the big pieces out so we know that the Vicon's not going to get blocked. We sieve all the big pieces out, then we get as much seed as we can. We say, okay, we've got 50 kgs of ryegrass seed and we've got to do 11 hectares. And we just work out, I normally put on about 300 kgs of manure in 25 kg bags, and then just mix all the seeds and everything into that manure, mix it all up, and then it's spread on with a Vicon. So that's how we spread the seed. But you do need the cow manure or something as a carrier, whether you're going to use sand but cow manure is nice and light. It's not hard on the equipment. The seed mixes in it easily. So that's how we actually do the seeding. And then on the dryland side, my son's put in center pivots. On the corners of the center pivots, on some of them he's gone regen. So the same again. Sorghum, sunflower, sun hemp, just normal flowers, marigolds and all that. We put in a 2 hectare patch. I think you all saw a video that it got right up to well over 2-3 meters, lab seed and everything in there. And then when we reaped it in winter, we just said, reap everything you can. So on the edges of the contours, there was stargrass seed. There was amaranthus, benongui seed. There was marigold seed. There was just everything. So you'll see a bag there. It looks very rough. A lot of sun hemp seed, sunflower seed, lab seed. We just told them to reap everything they could, reaped it all, threw it in a bag, and that's what we're going to go and regenerate again with the rains. So, we found that you do need to import winter seeds and winter legumes, but also there's a lot of our own natural stuff that you actually don't have to spend money on. Just go and reap it, use it. You said that red sorghum, we've reaped about 300 kgs of natural panicum seed. That very sweet sorghum. We've reaped sweet sorghum that you see growing amongst all the A1s, maize and that. And I think they use it for sugar cane. And my cattle foreman said to me, boss, you'll get seed the first year, but the second year you're not going to get any. So I said, why not? He says, oh, all the children will just eat it because it's so sweet. So, yeah, we just plant everything and anything that we can find. So I don't know if anyone's got any questions, but all I can say is just do it. But legumes, sun hemp, if I was doing dry land, we're planting, we're probably going to try and do about 15, 20 hectares of sun hemp seed just to get the seed. And then we'll just go and spread it everywhere, because that we know works in Zim. Clovers, you need irrigated. The Soratro, the silverleaf, all of that. Soratro up in more the sandier, dry areas. Silverleaf in the shade, under the trees. That does very well there. Yeah, so we just looking around the bush and trying to find anything that we can go and plant, basically. I don't know if anyone has any questions.
Confirm you've increased your stocking density on that area quite significantly.
Yeah, we never really measured stocking density before, but we've never had a healthier pasture than we have now. Even when we were putting on fertilizer, the vigor and the plants and everything. So the last video I think you saw, we had there's 40 dairy cattle in there and Mashona crosses and everything in that 15-meter strip, and then the grass was just getting away. So because we're doing some AI work with the 2018s, we've put the 2018s behind the chickens and behind the dairy cattle just to try and get that grass down a bit more. But the beauty is, I think 112 heifers coming in every night, dropping all that dung that they picked up out there, dropping all that dung, all that urine. It's just really, really good for the grass. Doug asked me to talk on the chickens. We started with 500 layers. It's a very hard learning curve. We've had quite a lot of deaths. We're still trying to get it taped. Jess incubates a whole lot of eggs for us, so we're crossing Sasso chickens with Highline now. It's actually quite a pretty chicken that comes out. But yeah, so we're trying to breed our own sort of hardier chickens that we don't have to do vaccinations and all that. But a figure to take home, I think, is 200 layers on a hectare of land over a year will give you 200 kgs of free nitrogen. So it's about 12 bags of AN free of charge, and that's what the American research shows you, what the dung will give you. They scoffle nice little holes and everything in the soil, and that's where you find some of your ryegrasses and your winter stuff germinate in those areas that they've disturbed and all that. But I think there is a very good market for the eggs. There's a good market for the eggs. The dung they're putting down is free nitrogen. It's a natural nitrogen. Flies, if any flies gets in that area that they're in, they just chase it down. They love flies. I still can't get flies to breed in the chugubus that we put around, because I think they just nail the adults before they even get a chance to go lay their eggs. We got a lot of security lights, so we just sweep up all the ladybirds every morning around our house. They go down to the chickens. When the guy brings the eggs up, the ladybirds go down. Not the ladybirds, those rose beetles. Rose beetles just go down for food. Yeah. So just anything to try and save costs. On the chickens, I try to reduce the food. So I think a normal battery chicken, I might be corrected, but a normal battery chicken or layer eats about 130 to 140 grams of food a day. We're down to 100 grams of food a day, but we on about 70% of eggs production. Whereas I think those battery birds are on about 95%. But you will get a better price for your eggs. So, and then you got to count the free nitrogen that you're getting also. So it's a whole lot of give and take. I think also we're going to be looking at broilers. So I've just ordered 200 Sasso day-olds. They're not sexed. So we did it once before, and then all the males you just turn into broilers. All the males you turn into broilers. Another very good market for free-range broilers, free-range eggs. You don't get you might get 20% more than urbans and the high line and all that. You might get 20% more, but you're getting more and more benefits for your soil. Your broilers, you're not going to grow out in 6 weeks. There's no chance you're going to grow them out in 6 weeks. You're probably going to do it in 8 to 10 weeks. But as I say, you're just improving your soil all the time. You're improving your pasture. You're getting quite a good return. And it's very satisfying when someone keeps phoning you and says, when are you going to increase your chickens? When are you going to bring more eggs? You know, it's really satisfying that you got stuff that people want. Doug, on the dairy, I don't know how far you want to go.
Just tell us what you
Yeah. So on the dairy side, Percy brought in some embryos from New Zealand, Kiwi cross embryos, some Jersey embryos, some Friesland. Well, the Friesland are still sitting in the flask because none of us really like the big Friesland. So they're still sitting in the flask. But I say that from Helena Mitchell because I think she's got pretty hardy Friesland. We got 12. 2 died before we even got a drop of milk out of them. The other 10 we've inseminated with a bull called Nungamiri. Marie knows all about it. So Nungamiri is from Mashona embryos and Kiwi cross bull called Sovereign. Sovereign now has 400,000 daughters in New Zealand. So he's very well proven bull, and it's not all about milk yield. It's more about, what do they call it? No, they've got it. The New Zealanders measure a breed. They call it a breeding index, or a it's a dollar, basically a dollar index. It's your cheaper bull or your cheaper animal, and a cow that's producing 80%. They measure everything because that's their biggest thing. 5 million liters of milk a year, and so they measure everything, and everyone comes around once a month and measures the cow and measures the milk yield and measures, and they call it a breeding worth. So they'll tell you how much the breeding worth is for that cow or that bull. And it's not about how many liters she gives you. It's her longevity, it's how much she eats, all that type of stuff. So Percy picked us some nice, small, adapted genetics for Zim. And we have now some lovely Friesland heifers, which are 50% Friesland, 25% Mashona, and 25% Kiwi cross. And those are beautiful, slick-coated, lovely heifers. I got a couple of videos of some of them, but we think for Zim there'll be a good market for those sort of animals, and they really look hardy and they look good. They look good. So the dairy is just in the regen, least cost. It's least cost, least input. See how much milk we can get out of it. That we don't have to pour food into, don't have to pour a lot of antibiotics, and just trying to breed a more of an adapted animal for our environment, whether it's on the beef side, whether it's on the dairy side, whether it's on the chickens. We're just trying to breed an animal that doesn't have to rely on, it's not oxytetracycline reliant. It can actually try and live on its own and fight its own diseases. So that's sort of what we're trying to do. Cheap and productive. That's sort of our aim. On the beef side, we do a lot of night dangers. For the first year ever, we've done lovely fire guards about 50 meters wide, and the cattle go in there at night and they just flatten everything, finish everything, and we've been able to control fires this year, and we just go around the boundary, 50 meters wide. Work out how many cattle. We normally try and give them a square meter a night. If there's 50 cattle in, I don't know, my math is it's not a square meter. The mathematicians can work it out. But if there's 50 cattle in there, it's 50 meters wide by 50 meters down wherever your boundary line wants to go. So that's how we sort of work it out. We move it every night religiously. This year I had a guy just parkland clearing any trees there in that strip. So he just parkland cleared, took all the bottom branches off, let the sunlight in. So you can sort of manage it. You know, they've done 7 moves this week. You can go back after a week and see how much his parkland cleared. So we haven't sent a roam harrow out. We haven't sent a gang burning out. We normally send about 12 people to go and burn fire guards, water cart, and it goes on for about 3 months. The cattle have done it all this year. And once we've been around the perimeter, if we want to cut a fire guard, in the middle, we just send them down the middle. So it's saved us a lot of money, and it's stopped a lot of fires. So we think that is a real winner, doing fire guards with your night dungers. We started it in about April. But because we're leasing on 7 different farms, so we actually couldn't get around. So if you could start earlier, you can maybe start your fire guards a bit earlier, but just work out how much you need to get around everywhere. Doug, I don't know what else you want to do.
That's fun.
Yeah.
Any questions?
Mark, Percy and Marie went around the farm. I was quite proud of the way we'd managed our bush and grasslands in the farm. And then Percy came back and he said, "Sheesh, you got a mess down in your flay. About time you did something about it." So it was a big wake-up call for me. Anyway, I'll give you a brief overview of what we're doing. A lot of it is based on electric fencing and how we manage the paddocks that we do. The overview of the farm, we're 407 hectares. If you take away the arable areas, the residential areas, leaves us with about 150 hectares of grazing. That's pretty much the unarable areas, non-arable areas. So at the moment, on the farm itself, we're running 360 head on 150 hectares of land. So that equals to about 2.4 animals per hectare, which equals a grazing problem. So we had to think about what we were doing. Marie had followed up quite a bit with Percy and I think Doug as well about electric fencing. And in a long story short, we ended up buying some electric fences. We divided the grazing area into small blocks of about 2 or 3 hectares each. They're variable sizes. They're also very different shapes, so it's difficult to get an exact block size. We mow a grass line, clear a grass line with a mowing machine, so that is easy for us to lay out our fences. We run 40 or 50 animals per 2 or 3 hectare block for 2 or 3 days, and we monitor the grass carefully within that block. We want to keep the grass in the generative stage. I don't want to flatten it. I don't want to leave the Spirobolus getting to the stage of where it's seeding or where the Hyperemia is getting woody. So we monitor it very, very carefully. Our breeding cows, heifers and young bulls are given priority with these paddocks because generally speaking, they are the paddocks with the freshest and the most vigorous grass. I'll break it down into summer and winter grazing because there's different principles. So we're splitting up the summer and the winter grazing. Our summer grazing plan is to graze with high density but short duration. We monitor the grass sward very, very carefully as it's important in planning the move. So we try and move the cattle between 2 and 3 times a week on each block. So we've got 4 different electric fence blocks in various parts of the farm, and we try and move them between 2 and 3 times a week, depending on the grass. It's all about grass management in the summertime. The winter grazing is a bit different. We've got the pivot blocks with either barley or maize stover. We divide those up into 2 hectare blocks with electric fences, and we graze them flat. We actually hammer them as much as we can. The guidelines that we use for grazing, in summer, we try and keep the grass at the vegetative stage. And it's a question of monitoring your grazing. In winter, it's based on maximum utilization of the crop residue. We want to get all that crop residue cleared out of the way, ready for the summer crops. In winter, we also supplement with barley hay. We take the hay off some of the lands. We supplement with barley hay and sunflower cake. In both cases, and I think it's a common theme with what Mark has said, it's hoof, dung, urine action. That's what it's all about. It's getting the soil surface disturbed as much as possible, and it's all about monitoring. Pasture enhancement or improvements that we've done, it's an ongoing process. Since we introduced the cattle in 97, there were very few acacia or vachellia on the farm. Now we have found in these last few years we've seen an exponential increase in the Siberiana in and around the farm. Obviously the cattle eating the seed pods and distributing the seeds, and they are germinating very, very well. The trees provide good grazing underneath, and the seed, a very good seed pod value. And looking at it recently, I think we're going to have to start thinning out the Siberianas this season, because they are now in some areas starting to canopy, which is not a good thing. We've introduced legumes. We've got silverleaf, greenleaf, incarnum, desmodium. We've got fine stem starlo, lab. We've spread them. These are put into the grazing areas, not into the croplands. The greenleaf and the silverleaf are self-seeding now and spreading very, very well. We're quite pleased with them. We've also used lab, and I've got some funnies there. Velvet bean is another one that we're going to throw in and see what happens. Our predominant grass species are Spirobolus, Hyperenia, Bracharia, Panicum, and broomgrass on the flays. We've got some Carambora lands. Those are our main grass species. Again, quite easy to monitor most of them. I'm also playing with a small block of land where we've taken 17 different species of grasses and shrubs and weeds and whatever else, any seeds that we could find, and we've mixed them and sown them together, and we'll see what happens to them, just out of a matter of interest. Some observations we've made, or results. We're coming up to the third year with our electric fences now. We've got very good ground cover in our grazing areas. There is a noticeable improvement. The grass reacted very, very quickly to the rain this year. We had a very thick ground cover. We had 38 mil in the first week of October, and it was amazing how the grass reacted. It came up, and we've actually been able to graze it quite successfully with the fences twice already this year. Although now, with the 6 weeks of drought that we've had, or dry period that we've had to open up the paddocks to make them bigger, because the cattle are having to hunt for grass at the moment. We noticed this area as well as something I've not seen before, that some of the areas had green grass for the duration of winter. It's not that it was growing, but there was green there. And this is the stuff as well that's reacted very, very quickly. And I think that's probably because the way we're doing things, there's an increase in subsoil moisture or soil moisture. This last season, our breeding herd stayed in particularly good condition, and we were very pleased with the PD results. So for us, the electric fences are essential. We've got 9 pivot blocks on the farm, and all the grazing areas are little bits and pieces left over. I've taken two areas I've fenced off just to see what happens with them. One of the blocks is a copse of trees. It's probably about 2.5, 3 hectares in extent. I want to see what happens when there's no cattle in there. And the other is a big seep we've got on the farm in one of the flays. There's a lot of funny endemic bird species there that I don't want to chase off. So I've stopped the cattle going in there, and it'll be interesting to see what happens to them as well. But electric fences for us are essential. There is improved grazing. We're finding the cattle are keeping their condition for longer. In terms of management with the cattle, it does entail one tractor with a water cart, and the tractor driver and assistant's job is to check that the water tanks are kept filled, because a lot of these blocks don't have access to water. And this tractor driver and his assistant are responsible for the supplementary feeding of the cattle. So that's about all I've got. It's just a very basic overview of what we're doing. Doug?